The thermometer on my garage wall read 18 degrees when I realized my heating oil tank was running on fumes. And that's when my phone rang with news that would turn my entire week into a nightmare. "Mr. Quinton, this is Dave from Morrison's Heating Oil," the voice on the other end said, sounding genuinely apologetic. "I'm sitting at the entrance to your development right now, but there's a woman here who won't let me through the gate. She's saying something about unauthorized commercial vehicles and HOA regulations." I pinched the bridge of my nose, already feeling the tension headache forming. "What does she look like?" "Middle-aged, blonde hair in that specific haircut, asking to speak to my manager," Dave said with a resigned laugh that told me he'd dealt with this type before. "That's Patricia Henderson," I muttered. "I'll be right there." I grabbed my coat and headed out into the bitter February morning in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The cold hit me like a wall, making me even more aware of how desperately I needed that heating oil delivery. My house was already getting cold, dropping to 63 degrees despite my ancient furnace working overtime to burn through the last drops in the tank. Patricia Henderson had been the president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association for 3 years, and in that time, she'd made it her personal mission to enforce every single rule in our covenant with the zeal of a medieval inquisitor. She'd fined the Johnsons for their Christmas lights being up 2 days past the January 1st deadline. She'd sent certified letters to the Ramirez family because their dog barked during quiet hours. She'd even tried to fine old Mrs. Chen for having the wrong shade of white on her mailbox post. But this was a new low, even for her. I drove my truck down to the main gate, which remained open during daytime hours but was monitored by Patricia's self-appointed security protocols. Sure enough, there she stood, clipboard in hand, blocking Dave's oil truck from entering. She wore a puffy winter coat that somehow looked both expensive and unflattering, and her expression radiated the particular kind of righteous indignation that only an HOA president on a power trip could muster. "Patricia," I called out, stepping out of my truck. "That's my heating oil delivery. I'm almost empty, and it's 18 degrees out here." She turned to me with that practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "Quinton, I'm sorry, but commercial vehicles over a certain weight limit aren't permitted in Meadowbrook Estates between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. It's Section 14, Paragraph 3 of the HOA Covenant. That's for construction vehicles," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Heating oil deliveries are essential services." "The covenant doesn't make that distinction," she replied, tapping her clipboard with a pen. "Commercial is commercial. If we make exceptions for one person, we have to make exceptions for everyone. That's how chaos begins." Dave leaned out of his truck window. "Madam, I have 4 other deliveries to make today. This is my route, and I've been delivering to this neighborhood for 6 years without any issues." "Well, I'm president now, and I'm enforcing our rules properly," Patricia said, standing her ground. "You can come back after 6 p.m. "I'll be off my shift by then," Dave protested. "And this gentleman needs his oil today. Do you know what happens when someone runs out of heating oil in this weather?" "That's not my concern," Patricia said. "Rules are rules." I felt my jaw clench. "Patricia, I'm asking you reasonably. My tank is nearly empty. My house is already getting cold." "Then you should have planned better and ordered your oil earlier," she said with that infuriating smile. "Personal responsibility, Quinton. It's something we could all use more of these days." I wanted to argue more, but I could see in her eyes that she was enjoying this. The power, the control, the ability to make someone's day harder just because she could. I'd seen that look before when she denied the Martinez family's request to install a wheelchair ramp because it didn't match the aesthetic standards of the neighborhood. Fine, I said. Dave, I'm sorry about this. Can you really not come back later? Dave shook his head apologetically. My shift ends at 5 and I've got my kids' basketball game at 6:30. Tomorrow's my day off, so the earliest would be Monday. It was Friday morning. The forecast called for temperatures in the teens all weekend, with possible single digits Sunday night. I'd never make it to Monday without heat. What about emergency delivery? I asked. That's double the rate, and we'd need to send someone special. Probably wouldn't be until tomorrow afternoon, and you're looking at an extra $300. I closed my eyes, calculating. I could afford it, but it galled me to pay extra because Patricia Henderson was on a power trip. But what choice did I have? I'll call the office and arrange it, I told Dave. Thanks for trying. As Dave's truck pulled away, Patricia was already walking back toward her white Lexus SUV, probably feeling quite pleased with herself. I stood there in the cold, watching my breath puff out in clouds, and felt anger settling deep in my gut. What Patricia didn't know, what she couldn't have known because she never bothered to learn anything about the people she lorded over, was that I wasn't just Quinton Quade, homeowner. I was also Quinton Quade, owner and operator of Quad HVAC services, and my company held the maintenance contract for half the commercial buildings in Lancaster County, including St. Mary's Episcopal Church on Chestnut Street, where Patricia Henderson attended service every single Sunday, rain or shine, sitting in the third pew from the front, always arriving exactly 15 minutes early. And St. Mary's heating system, a massive oil-fired boiler that I'd personally installed 6 years ago, was due for its monthly maintenance check this weekend. In fact, I'd been scheduled to go over there Saturday afternoon to run diagnostics and ensure everything was running smoothly through the rest of winter. The wheels in my head started turning as I drove back to my house. I wasn't a vindictive person by nature. I'd built my business on reliability, honesty, and treating people fairly. But there was a difference between being vindictive and simply choosing where to allocate my time and resources. I had the right to prioritize my work however I saw fit. Back at my house, I called Morrison's Heating Oil and arranged for an emergency Saturday delivery at the inflated rate. $312 extra, to be exact. Then I made another call, this one to Father Michael at St. Mary's. "Father, this is Quinton Quade," I said when he picked up. "Quinton, good to hear from you," his warm voice came through the phone. "You're still on for tomorrow's maintenance check, I hope?" "That's actually why I'm calling," I said carefully. "I'm going to need to reschedule. I've had an emergency situation come up and I'm completely swamped. How's the system running?" "Oh, seems fine to me," Father Michael said. "Though I'll be honest, I don't really know what I'm listening for. You're the expert." "The boiler's been running well, no unusual noises or smells?" I asked. "Not that I've noticed, but then again, I spend most of my time in the chapel, not down in the basement." "Tell you what," I said, "I'm going to need to push this back to next week. Tuesday or Wednesday, most likely. If you notice anything unusual, any strange sounds, any drop in heat, call me immediately and I'll come right over. But if everything seems normal, we should be fine waiting a few more days." "That works for me," Father Michael said agreeably. "We've got a busy weekend anyway." The Women's Auxiliary is having their winter luncheon tomorrow, and you know Sunday service always packs the house this time of year. More people come to church when it's cold, I think. They appreciate the warmth. "I'm sure it'll be fine," I said. "But again, any issues at all, you call me." After hanging up, I sat in my increasingly chilly house and thought about what I was doing. Was I being petty? Maybe. But I genuinely was swamped now, dealing with my own heating emergency that Patricia had directly caused. I wasn't sabotaging anything. I wasn't going to damage the church's heating system. I was simply rescheduling a routine maintenance check by a few days. What happened after that would be entirely up to fate and the church's 30-year-old boiler system. Saturday morning arrived with temperatures hovering at 15 degrees. My emergency oil delivery came at 2 in the afternoon, and I wrote the check with a scowl, thinking about Patricia's smug face. The driver, a young guy named Carlos who I didn't recognize, was apologetic about the charge. Company policy for weekend emergency calls, he explained. I don't make the rules. I know, I said. It's not your fault. Someone else made this an emergency when it didn't need to be. After my tank was filled and my furnace was humming happily again, I spent the rest of Saturday catching up on paperwork and service reports. I didn't go to St. Mary's. I didn't call to check on their system. I simply stayed home, warm and comfortable, while the temperature outside continued to drop. Sunday morning, I slept in, made myself a big breakfast and settled in to watch some basketball. Around 10:30, my phone rang. It was Father Michael. "Quinton, I'm so sorry to bother you on a Sunday," he said, and I could hear stress in his usually calm voice. "But the church is freezing. I came in this morning to prepare for service and I don't think the heat is working properly. It's absolutely frigid in here." "What's the temperature?" I asked, sitting up. "The thermostat says 52 degrees and it's set for 70. I can hear the boiler running, but it doesn't seem to be producing heat like it should. We've got service starting in an hour and we have at least 100 people coming." I paused, letting the moment hang there. "Father, I'm really sorry, but I'm not available today. It's Sunday, my day off, and I have plans." "I understand. I know it's asking a lot," Father Michael said, "but this is an emergency. We can't hold service in a 50-degree church. Some of our parishioners are elderly. Mrs. Henderson has already called to ask if we're canceling, and I had to tell her we're not, but Quinton, I don't know what to do." Mrs. Henderson. Patricia. Of course she'd be one of the first to complain. "I can walk you through some basic troubleshooting over the phone," I offered. "But I really can't come out there today. If it's a serious problem, you might need to cancel service and I can come first thing Monday morning." "We can't cancel," Father Michael said firmly. "It's the first Sunday of Lent. We've got the whole liturgical schedule built around this. Plus, like I said, we have the largest attendance in winter. People depend on this." I felt a small twinge of guilt. The congregation didn't deserve this. But then again, I really didn't have any obligation to work on Sunday. It was my day off, and the only reason this was an emergency was because I'd rescheduled the maintenance that would have caught this problem yesterday. "Father, I'm really sorry," I said. "The best I can do is walk you through checking a few things. Can you get down to the basement where the boiler is?" 10 minutes of phone diagnosis revealed what I'd suspected. The boiler's circulation pump was failing. It was running, but not efficiently enough to push hot water through all the radiators in the large church building. It was a problem I would have caught and fixed during yesterday's maintenance if I'd been there. "Can I fix it myself?" Father Michael asked hopefully. "Not unless you have experience with commercial boiler systems," I said. "It needs a part replacement and recalibration. It's not dangerous. The boiler will keep running like this, but you're not going to get proper heat." "How long would it take you to fix if you came out?" "About an hour, maybe 90 minutes with the recalibration." Father Michael was quiet for a long moment. "Quinton, I'll be honest with you. I'm going to have to pay you whatever you ask for emergency Sunday rates. We can't hold service like this. I'm begging you." I thought about it. I thought about Patricia Henderson, sitting in her warm house, about to drive to church expecting everything to be perfect. I thought about her blocking my heating oil delivery, about the $300 extra I'd paid, because of her petty power trip. My emergency Sunday rate is $500 plus parts, I said. Triple my normal rate. Done, Father Michael said without hesitation. Please, Quinton. Our service starts at 11:30. I checked my watch. It was 11:15. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I gathered my tools and headed out into the 20-degree morning. The roads were clear, and I made good time to St. Mary's, pulling into the parking lot at 11:05. Cars were already arriving, parishioners bundled in heavy coats, hurrying toward the church entrance. Father Michael met me at the side door that led down to the basement. Thank you so much for coming. I know it's your day off. That's why it costs what it costs, I said, not unkindly. Let's see what we're dealing with. The boiler room was warm, the massive oil-fired unit rumbling away faithfully. But as I diagnosed over the phone, the circulation pump was struggling. I could hear the bearing wearing out, that distinctive whining sound that meant it was on its last legs. If I'd been here yesterday, I'd have replaced it then as a preventive measure. As it was, it had chosen the worst possible time to fail. I had a replacement pump in my van. I kept common parts for all my major contracts on hand for exactly this kind of situation. Under normal circumstances, having the part available would have made me feel good, prepared. Today, it just felt ironic. Upstairs, I could hear the church filling with people. Footsteps, voices, the organ doing its pre-service warm-up. I worked methodically, shutting down the circulation system, draining the necessary lines, removing the failing pump. At 11:25, I heard a commotion upstairs. A woman's voice, loud and complaining, carried down through the heating vents. Father Michael, it's absolutely freezing in here. This is unacceptable. We can't possibly hold service in these conditions. Think of the elderly members. Think of the children. This is a health and safety issue. Patricia Henderson's voice was unmistakable. I heard Father Michael's measured response. We're aware of the problem, Patricia. We have a technician here now making repairs. We're going to start service on time and the heat should be restored during the service. Who's the technician? Are they qualified? Because this seems like negligence to me. The church should have preventive maintenance. We do have preventive maintenance, Father Michael said with remarkable patience. Sometimes equipment fails unexpectedly. It's being handled. Well, I'm going to be watching the time, Patricia said. If this isn't resolved within the hour, I'm going to have to speak to the bishop about the conditions here. I almost laughed. Patricia Henderson, threatening to complain to the bishop because she was slightly uncomfortable. The same Patricia Henderson who'd forced me into a $300 emergency delivery because she couldn't be bothered to understand the difference between a construction vehicle and an essential service. I installed the new circulation pump, taking my time to do it right. At 11:35, 5 minutes after service had started, I fired the system back up. The new pump hummed smoothly, and I could immediately feel the difference as hot water began flowing properly through the lines. I spent another 15 minutes checking pressures, calibrating the flow rate, and making sure everything was running optimally. By the time I cleaned up my tools and headed upstairs, it was almost noon. The church was still cold but warming. It would take another 20 minutes for the radiators to heat the space properly. I slipped into the back of the church, not wanting to interrupt the service. Father Michael was mid-sermon, and the congregation sat bundled in their coats, some keeping their gloves on. I spotted Patricia Henderson in her usual third-row pew, her expression sour, arms crossed tightly across her chest. Father Michael saw me and gave a slight nod. I returned it and quietly made my way back toward the basement stairs. But before I could disappear, Patricia turned around, scanning the church, and her eyes landed on me. I saw the recognition hit her. Her eyes widened, and her mouth opened slightly. She knew exactly who I was, and I could see the wheels turning in her head, putting together what I was doing there. I gave her a small, professional nod and disappeared back down to the basement. 20 minutes later, as I was finishing up my final checks and writing notes for the service report, Father Michael came down the stairs. "Quinton, you're a lifesaver," he said warmly. "I can already feel the difference up there." "What was the problem?" "Circulation pump was failing," I explained, showing him the old part. "It's something I would have caught during yesterday's maintenance if I'd been able to make it. These things usually give warning signs for a few days before they fail completely, just bad timing." "Well, I'm grateful you could come today," Father Michael said. He handed me a church check already made out for $500. "And I've got the part cost, whatever that is." "The pump is $280, I said. "I'll send you an invoice with the full breakdown." Father Michael wrote me a personal check for $300. "Rounded up to $800 total. You saved us today, and I know it's your day off. You could have left us hanging." I accepted the check, folded it, and put it in my wallet. "I wouldn't do that, Father. This is my contract, my responsibility. When you call with an emergency, I come. That's the deal." "Not every contractor is that reliable," Father Michael said. "We're lucky to have you." As I packed up the last of my tools, Patricia Henderson appeared at the top of the basement stairs. "Father Michael, may I have a word?" "Of course, Patricia," he said, then turned to me. "Quinton, thank you again. I'll let you get out of here." But Patricia was already coming down the stairs, her heels clicking on the concrete steps. "Mr. Quade," she said, her voice icy, "I didn't realize you serviced the church." "I've had the maintenance contract for 6 years," I said pleasantly, "since the new boiler was installed." "How convenient that the heat failed right after you were blocked from receiving an unauthorized delivery in our neighborhood," she said, and I could see the accusation forming in her eyes. Father Michael looked between us, confused. "I'm sorry, what, miss?" "Henderson blocked my heating oil delivery on Friday," I explained calmly. "I had to pay for an emergency weekend delivery at triple the normal cost because she decided that an essential service vehicle violated HOA regulations." "It did violate regulations," Patricia insisted. "Commercial vehicles over a certain weight during daytime hours. It's very clear." "And when did the church's heating problem start?" Patricia continued, looking at Father Michael but clearly implying something about me. "I noticed it this morning when I came in to prepare for service," Father Michael said. "But Quinton, didn't you say this was something that had been developing for a few days?" "That's how circulation pumps usually fail," I said, meeting Patricia's gaze steadily. "They don't just stop working instantly. The bearings wear down, efficiency drops, and eventually they can't maintain proper flow. If I'd been here for the scheduled maintenance yesterday, I would have caught it and replaced the pump then. But I had to reschedule because of my own heating emergency that came up Friday." Patricia's face was reddening. "Are you suggesting that you deliberately skipped maintenance to punish the church because of me?" "I'm saying I had an emergency that prevented me from keeping my Saturday appointment, and I rescheduled for this coming week," I said evenly. "Equipment failures are unpredictable. That's why we do preventive maintenance, to catch problems before they become emergencies." "This seems highly suspicious to me," Patricia said. "Patricia," Father Michael said gently, "I think you might be reading too much into a coincidence. Quinton has been nothing but reliable for years, and he came out on his day off on short notice to fix this problem." "I'm grateful, not suspicious." But Patricia wasn't done. "I want documentation of this supposed failing pump. I want proof that this wasn't sabotage." I'd had enough. I picked up the old pump from my tool bag and held it out to her. Here's the failed part. You can take it to any HVAC technician in Lancaster County, and they'll confirm it's worn out. The serial number matches the maintenance records. This pump was installed 6 years ago with the boiler, and it's lived its expected lifespan. There's no sabotage, no conspiracy. Just a part that wore out and needed replacing. Patricia looked at the pump like I was handing her a dead rat. I don't want to touch that greasy thing. Then don't make accusations you're not prepared to investigate, I said, putting it back in my bag. Father Michael, I'll email you the full service report tomorrow with photos and documentation. The church heating system is now running better than it has in months. The new pump is more efficient than the old one. You should actually see a slight decrease in your heating costs. Thank you, Quinton, Father Michael said firmly with a pointed look at Patricia. We appreciate everything you've done. I headed up the stairs and out to my van, leaving Patricia and Father Michael to whatever conversation they were about to have. As I loaded my tools, I felt no guilt, no shame. I'd done exactly what I'd promised to do. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I'd simply rescheduled a maintenance appointment because of a legitimate emergency, and sometimes equipment fails at inconvenient times. That's life. What Patricia couldn't seem to grasp was that actions have consequences. She'd chosen to exercise her petty power over me on Friday, and that had created a cascading series of events. I'd had to deal with an emergency. I'd had to reschedule my other work, and the church's heating system had failed at an inconvenient time through simple mechanical wear. I'd still shown up and fixed it, even on my day off, even at considerable personal inconvenience. I'd upheld my contract and my professional obligations. The fact that Patricia had been uncomfortable in a cold church for an hour was just karma doing its thing. Monday morning started with an email from Father Michael thanking me again for the emergency service and confirming receipt of my detailed service report. He mentioned that the church had been comfortably warm for the evening service, and several parishioners had specifically commented on how nice the heat felt. Monday afternoon, I got a very different email, this one from Patricia Henderson to my business address, CC'd to Father Michael and about a dozen other people I recognized as Meadowbrook Estates HOA board members. The subject line was complaint regarding unprofessional conduct and possible sabotage. I read through her lengthy message with growing disbelief. Patricia claimed that I had deliberately neglected my maintenance duties at St. Mary's Church as revenge for her appropriate enforcement of HOA regulations. She accused me of creating a dangerous situation for elderly parishioners and children. She demanded that the church terminate their contract with my company. She further demanded that I be investigated for unethical business practices. The email went on to suggest that the HOA board should consider additional restrictions on my business activities, including potentially barring me from operating a commercial business from my home address in Meadowbrook Estates, even though my business office was actually in a commercial building downtown, and I just lived in the neighborhood. I sat back in my office chair and laughed. Actually laughed. Patricia Henderson had made one of the classic blunders of petty tyrants. She put her accusations in writing, CC'd a bunch of people, and in doing so, created a documented record of harassment. I forwarded the email to my lawyer, Tom Pritchard, with a simple note. This is the woman I told you about. Thoughts? Tom called me within an hour. Quinton, this is actually actionable. She's made demonstrably false accusations about your professional conduct, damaged your business reputation by sending this to multiple parties, and threatened your livelihood. I'm honestly surprised someone could be this reckless. So what do? I asked. First, I'll draft a cease and desist letter. This needs to stop immediately. Second, we document everything. I want a timeline of events, when your oil delivery was blocked, when you scheduled and rescheduled the church maintenance, the mechanical facts about the pump failure, everything. Third, I want all your contracts, licenses, and professional certifications ready to go. If she's going to question your professionalism, we're going to bury her in documentation proving otherwise. Is she going to back down? I asked. Tom laughed. People like this. Rarely. She's dug in now. She thinks she's right, and she's got the power of the HOA behind her. But here's the thing, Quinton. The HOA is a civil organization with specific powers defined by covenant. She stepped way outside those bounds. She can't legally restrict you from running a licensed business, and she definitely can't send defamatory emails accusing you of sabotage without evidence. So this is going to get worse before it gets better, I said. Probably, Tom admitted. But you're in the right here. Document everything, don't engage with her directly, and let me handle the legal communication. That evening, I got a call from Dennis Hartman, one of my neighbors in Meadowbrook Estates, who I'd always gotten along with. He was on the HOA board, one of the people CC'd on Patricia's email. Quinton, I want to apologize, Dennis said right away. Patricia sent that email without consulting the rest of the board, and I want you to know that not all of us agree with her position. I appreciate that, I said. Between you and me, Patricia's been getting worse, Dennis continued. The power's gone to her head. We've had 3 families move out of the neighborhood in the past year specifically because of her overreach. The Johnsons, the Ramirez family, even the Chens are thinking about it. She's killing property values with her nonsense. Why don't you vote her out? I asked. Dennis sighed. We're trying. Elections are in April, but she's got a couple of loyalists on the board who back her up on everything, and not enough people show up to the HOA meetings to build momentum for change. Most people just want to live their lives without the drama. I get that, I said. But now she's gone after my business. I can't just let that slide. I wouldn't expect you to, Dennis said. Look, I'm going to propose an emergency board meeting to address her email. It was inappropriate and not approved by the board. I'll let you know what happens. The HOA board meeting happened Wednesday evening. I wasn't invited since I was technically the subject of complaint, but Dennis called me afterward with a full report. It was a disaster, he said bluntly. Patricia doubled down on everything. She's convinced you sabotaged the church's heating system. She presented a timeline that supposedly proves you had means and motive. She's even talking about filing a complaint with the state licensing board for HVAC contractors. Based on what evidence? I asked. That's what I asked, Dennis said. Her evidence is basically that the timing was suspicious. Your oil delivery was blocked on Friday. You rescheduled the church maintenance from Saturday to next week, and the church heat failed Sunday. Therefore, in her mind, you must have deliberately caused the failure. That's not how mechanical systems work, I said. I know that, you know that, but Patricia's convinced she's uncovered some kind of conspiracy. The worst part is, her supporters on the board are backing her up. Mary Schultz and Robert Kenmore both voted to support a formal HOA complaint against you. The rest of us voted against it, so the motion failed, but it was 5-3, closer than I'd like. What happens now? I asked. Patricia's talking about calling an emergency general meeting of all HOA members to present her case, Dennis said. She needs 20% of homeowners to petition for it, and she's going door to door collecting signatures. I felt a headache forming. This is getting out of hand. I know, Dennis said. For what it's worth, I'm voting against her in April, and I'm encouraging everyone I know to do the same. but until then, we're stuck with her as president. Thursday morning, Tom's cease and desist letter was delivered to Patricia Henderson via certified mail. It was thorough, professional, and made it clear that her accusations were defamatory and needed to stop immediately. It demanded that she send a retraction email to everyone who'd received her original message, and it warned that continued harassment would result in a lawsuit. Thursday afternoon, Patricia called an emergency HOA meeting for Saturday morning. She'd collected her 20% petition signatures, mostly from people who probably had no idea what they were signing up for. Friday evening, I got a call from Father Michael. "Quinton, I need to tell you something. Patricia came to see me today. She's been pressuring me to terminate our contract with your company." "On what grounds?" I asked, though I already knew. "She's convinced you sabotaged our heating system, and she's concerned that keeping you on contract represents a liability for the church. She's even implied that if we don't terminate the contract, she might bring it up with the bishop." "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her that your service has been exemplary for 6 years, that I have complete confidence in your professionalism, and that the church has no intention of changing contractors based on unfounded accusations," Father Michael said firmly. "I also told her that I found her behavior concerning and that she should focus on her own relationship with God rather than trying to destroy someone else's livelihood." I felt a wave of gratitude. "Thank you, Father. That means a lot. Quinton, I'm a pastor. I've been doing this for 25 years. I know the difference between someone trying to serve others and someone trying to control others." Patricia Henderson falls firmly in the latter category. She's not motivated by genuine concern for the church or for anyone's safety. She's motivated by ego and the need to be right. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear. The HOA meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the Meadowbrook Estates Community Center, a small building near the neighborhood entrance that was used for board meetings and the occasional residents gathering. I almost didn't go. Tom had advised me that I didn't have to attend, that anything said at the meeting couldn't be used officially against me without proper legal procedure. But Dennis had called Friday night and encouraged me to be there. "Patricia's been spreading a lot of misinformation," he'd said. "She's telling people you're a dangerous contractor, that you sabotage clients, that you can't be trusted. If you're not there to defend yourself, people will only hear her side." So I went, arriving 15 minutes early to find the parking lot already half full. Apparently, Patricia had drummed up quite a bit of interest in her crusade against me. I recognized most of the cars, neighbors I'd lived near for the past 8 years. Inside the community center, about 40 people had gathered, which was an impressive turnout for a neighborhood of 120 homes. Most HOA meetings attracted maybe 10 people at most. Patricia stood at the front of the room next to a projector screen, her laptop open, looking like she was preparing for a corporate presentation. Dennis caught my eye and nodded toward a seat he'd saved. I sat down, feeling uncomfortably like I was back in high school, facing some kind of social tribunal. Patricia called the meeting to order at 10 sharp. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. I've called this meeting because we have a serious situation developing in our community. One of our residents has engaged in behavior that I believe violates not only our HOA covenant but basic standards of professional ethics and possibly criminal law." A murmur went through the crowd. Criminal law. She was escalating. Patricia clicked to her first slide, which showed a photo of my house with my name and address. Quinton Quade has lived in Meadowbrook Estates for 8 years. He operates an HVAC business and has generally been a quiet neighbor. However, recent events have revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior when he doesn't get his way. The next slide showed a timeline. On Friday, February 7th, a commercial oil delivery truck attempted to enter our neighborhood during prohibited hours. As HOA president, I enforced our covenant by denying entry to this vehicle, which exceeded our weight limits for commercial traffic. Someone in the audience raised their hand. It was Margaret Chen. The elderly woman Patricia had previously hassled about her mailbox. That was a heating oil delivery. Essential services are exempt from commercial vehicle restrictions according to the county regulations. The HOA covenant supersedes county regulations within our private community, Patricia said dismissively. Next, on Saturday, February 8th, Mr. Quade failed to perform scheduled maintenance at St. Mary's Episcopal Church, where he holds a service contract. The next slide showed the church. Then on Sunday, February 9th, the church's heating system mysteriously failed right before Sunday service, leaving over 100 people, including elderly parishioners and children, in a dangerously cold building. It wasn't dangerously cold, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. It was 52 degrees and I had it fixed within an hour. Patricia's eyes flashed with anger at the interruption. The point, Mr. Quade, is the suspicious timing. You were denied something on Friday. You skipped maintenance on Saturday. The system failed on Sunday. This is a clear pattern of retaliatory behavior. That's not what happened, I said, standing up. The circulation pump failed due to normal mechanical wear. It's a part that was 6 years old, past its expected service life. I rescheduled Saturday's maintenance because I was dealing with an emergency, my own heating situation that you directly caused by blocking my delivery. So you admit you rescheduled the maintenance, Patricia said triumphantly. Yes, by 2 business days, I said. Which is completely normal and within the terms of my service contract. Equipment doesn't care about scheduling. It fails when it fails. The pump bearings had been wearing down for days, probably weeks. If I'd been there Saturday, I would have caught it early. But even if I had been, there's no guarantee it wouldn't have lasted another week or failed Friday instead. Dennis stood up. Patricia, I think you're making some pretty serious accusations without any actual evidence of wrongdoing. Has any HVAC expert reviewed your theory? I've spoken to several contractors who confirmed that it's technically possible to sabotage a heating system, Patricia said. Possible and probable are 2 different things, I countered. It's also technically possible to sabotage a car's brakes, but that doesn't mean every mechanic who works on a car that later has brake failure is guilty of sabotage. Another neighbor, Steve Morrison, raised his hand. I'm a mechanical engineer. I work in industrial systems. What Quinton is describing, bearing failure in a circulation pump, is completely normal. These things wear out. The timing being inconvenient doesn't make it sabotage. That's just confirmation bias. Patricia's face was getting red. The timing is too convenient to be coincidence. And furthermore, Mr. Quade charged the church $500 for an emergency Sunday service call. He profited from this situation he created. I charged my standard emergency off-hours rate, I said, which is clearly posted on my website and in all my service contracts. Father Michael agreed to the rate before I came out. And if you're suggesting I'd sabotage equipment just to make $500, you clearly don't understand how business works. I make more money from preventive maintenance and regular service than I ever do from emergency calls. They're inconvenient, they disrupt my schedule, and they create unhappy clients. No contractor wants emergency calls. Unless they're trying to punish someone, Patricia insisted. Tom Pritchard stood up from where he'd been sitting in the back. I hadn't even seen him come in. Excuse me, my name is Tom Pritchard. I'm Mr. Quade's attorney. Miss Henderson, you've now publicly accused my client of sabotage, fraud, and what you've implied could be criminal behavior. You've done so without any evidence beyond timing that you find suspicious. I want to make it very clear to everyone in this room that these accusations are defamatory, and you are opening yourself and potentially this HOA to serious legal liability. Patricia looked shaken for the first time. I have freedom of speech. Freedom of speech doesn't protect you from defamation claims when you make false statements that damage someone's reputation and business, Tom said calmly. You've received a cease and desist letter. You were advised to stop making these accusations. Instead, you've called this meeting and escalated your claims. I want the record to show that I've advised everyone present that what you're alleging is not supported by any facts, and participating in spreading these allegations could expose you to liability as well. The room got very quiet. People started looking uncomfortable, several whispering to each other. Dennis stood up again. I move that we end this meeting and table any discussion of action against Quinton Quade until the board has consulted with the HOA's attorney about the proper legal procedures. I second that motion, Margaret Chen called out. We're not voting on that, Patricia said quickly. This is an informational meeting, not a voting session. Then what exactly is the purpose of this meeting? Steve Morrison asked. If you're not proposing any action, if you're just making accusations, then this is just a public smear campaign. More murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Patricia was losing control of her audience. The purpose is to inform the community about a danger in our midst, she said, her voice rising. Quinton Quade has shown that he's willing to endanger people when he doesn't get his way. Today it's a church. Tomorrow it could be someone's home. What if he has a contract with one of your homes? What if he decides to retaliate against you? That's enough, I said loudly. Patricia, you're not concerned about anyone's safety. You're upset because someone finally pushed back against your petty tyranny. You blocked an essential service delivery because you could, because it gave you a sense of power. When that decision had consequences, when it disrupted my schedule and cost me money, you couldn't handle someone not bending to your will. Now you're on a crusade to destroy my reputation because your ego can't accept that you were wrong. I was not wrong, Patricia shot back. The covenant clearly states, the covenant was written to prevent construction vehicles from tearing up our roads during high traffic hours, Dennis interrupted. Everyone knows that. It's been explained in 3 different board meetings. Heating oil deliveries, propane deliveries, septic services. These are essential services that have always been allowed. You chose to reinterpret the covenant to suit your power trip. Several people started talking at once. The meeting was devolving into chaos. Patricia tried to regain control, but the momentum had shifted. People were angry now, not at me, but at her. An older gentleman I recognized as Harold Stevenson stood up. I've been living in this neighborhood for 15 years. I was here when the covenant was written. Dennis is absolutely right. Essential services were always meant to be exempt. Patricia, you've been looking for problems where there aren't any since you became president. My wife and I are tired of it. We're tired of the constant letters, the fines for ridiculous violations, the atmosphere of suspicion and rules. This is supposed to be a community, not a prison. Here, here, several people called out. Patricia looked around the room, and I could see the realization dawning on her face that she'd miscalculated badly. She'd expected people to rally around her, to be outraged at the threat she'd manufactured. Instead, they were turning against her. This meeting is adjourned, she said abruptly, closing her laptop. You can't just adjourn a meeting you called, Dennis said. We need to vote on whether the board should take any action based on your accusations." "Fine," Patricia snapped. "All those in favor of the board investigating Quinton Quade for the allegations I've presented, raise your hands." 3 hands went up, including Patricia's own and her 2 loyal supporters, Mary Schultz and Robert Kenmore. All those opposed. At least 30 hands shot up, including every board member except the 3 who'd voted in favor. "The motion fails," Dennis announced. "This matter is closed unless actual evidence of wrongdoing emerges. Patricia, I'm formally requesting that you issue a retraction of your email and public apology to Quinton for these baseless accusations." "I will not," Patricia said. "I stand by everything I've said." Tom stepped forward. "Then we'll see you in court. Mr. Quade has grounds for a defamation suit, and given that you've now doubled down on your false accusations in a public forum with witnesses, you've made his case considerably stronger." The meeting broke up after that, people filing out in small groups, many stopping to talk to me, to apologize for Patricia's behavior, to express support. Several people mentioned they'd be voting against her in the April election. Margaret Chen hugged me and told me to stay strong. Dennis pulled me aside as the crowd thinned. "Quinton, I'm really sorry it came to this. The board is going to have an emergency session to discuss removing Patricia from the presidency before her term ends. What she did today, calling this meeting, making these accusations, it's beyond the pale. She's exposed the HOA to legal liability." "I appreciate the support," I said, "but honestly, I just want to move on with my life and my business." "I understand," Dennis said, "but Patricia's not going to let this go. You need to be prepared for her to escalate further." He was right. Monday morning, I got a call from the Pennsylvania State Board of Heating and Air Conditioning Contractors. A complaint had been filed against my license, alleging professional misconduct and potential sabotage. The complaint was signed by Patricia Henderson. Tom advised me to cooperate fully with the investigation. "They'll see right through this," he said. "You've got documentation, you've got the failed part, you've got witness testimony from Father Michael. The board deals with frivolous complaints all the time." Still, it was stressful. I had to compile comprehensive records of the church maintenance history, detailed documentation of the pump failure, expert analysis of the failed component, and statements from Father Michael and the church's board of directors. It took days of work, all because Patricia couldn't let go of her manufactured grievance. The state board investigator, a thorough woman named Jennifer Kowalski, came to my office the following week. She reviewed everything meticulously, asked detailed technical questions, and even visited St. Mary's to inspect the new pump installation and interview Father Michael directly. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from the state board. The complaint had been dismissed as unfounded. The letter noted that all evidence supported normal mechanical failure, that my rescheduling of maintenance was reasonable and within contract terms, and that my emergency response was professional and appropriate. The letter further noted that filing false complaints against licensed contractors could result in penalties for the complainant. I sent a copy of the letter to Tom, who added it to what he called our evidence folder. By mid-March, the situation had escalated to full-blown legal proceedings. Tom filed a defamation suit against Patricia Henderson in Lancaster County Court, seeking damages for harm to my business reputation, the cost of defending against her false complaint to the state board, and emotional distress. Patricia hired a lawyer, a local attorney named Richard Bronson, who had a reputation for aggressive tactics. His first move was to file a motion to dismiss, arguing that Patricia's statements were protected opinion and that she had a right to voice concerns about public safety. The judge denied the motion. In her ruling, Judge Sandra Martinez noted that Patricia had made specific factual allegations of sabotage and misconduct, not mere opinions, and that these allegations were demonstrably false based on the state board's findings. In early April, the HOA held its scheduled elections. Patricia Henderson lost her bid for re-election by a landslide. Dennis Hartman was elected as the new president with 70% of the vote. One of his first acts was to clarify the commercial vehicle policy in writing, explicitly exempting essential services like heating oil deliveries, and to issue a formal apology on behalf of the HOA for the harassment I'd endured. The April HOA newsletter included a prominent notice about respecting neighbors and avoiding personal vendettas. It didn't name Patricia specifically, but everyone knew what it was about. Meanwhile, the lawsuit moved forward. Discovery revealed some interesting information. Patricia had sent numerous private messages to other HOA members trying to build support for her campaign against me. In these messages, she'd made even more extreme allegations, including suggesting that I was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. She'd also contacted several of my other commercial clients, including the Lancaster County School District and 2 local businesses, suggesting they review their contracts with my company due to serious concerns about reliability and safety. None of them had taken her seriously, and several had forwarded her messages to me, which became additional evidence of her harassment campaign. Tom was building a comprehensive case. "She's done my job for me," he said. "She documented her own malicious intent." Most defamation cases struggle to prove actual malice, but Patricia's written messages show a clear pattern of trying to destroy your business out of personal spite. The breakthrough came in late April, when we deposed Patricia under oath. Her lawyer advised her to settle before the deposition, but she refused, still convinced she was in the right. Under questioning, Patricia admitted that she had no technical expertise in HVAC systems. She admitted she had never actually inspected the failed pump. She admitted she had no evidence of sabotage beyond her interpretation of the timing. When Tom asked her why she'd contacted my other clients to suggest they drop their contracts with me, she said it was her civic duty to warn people about a dangerous contractor. "But you had no evidence he was dangerous, correct?" Tom asked. "I had the evidence of what happened at the church," Patricia insisted. "You mean the normal mechanical failure that the state board investigated and found no wrongdoing?" Tom pressed. "They could have been wrong," Patricia said. "Did you present any evidence to the state board that they didn't consider?" "No." "But so you're saying the state board, professional investigators with expertise in HVAC systems, were wrong and you, with no technical training, knew better?" Patricia's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The deposition transcript read like a textbook example of malicious defamation. The following week, Richard Bronson called Tom to discuss settlement. Patricia was finally willing to admit she'd gone too far, though she still wouldn't admit she'd been wrong about the original oil delivery issue. The settlement took another month to negotiate. In the end, Patricia agreed to pay $80,000 in damages, issue a formal written retraction and apology to be distributed to everyone who'd received her original accusatory email, agree to a permanent restraining order preventing her from contacting my clients or making any further statements about me or my business, and resign from any and all HOA positions or committees. The money was nice, though after legal fees it was less impressive. The real victory was the public vindication and the restraining order. Patricia couldn't hurt my business anymore. The written apology, which Tom made sure was comprehensive and unambiguous, was sent out in mid-June. I heard through Dennis that Patricia had been furious about having to sign it, but her lawyer had made it clear that if the case went to trial, she'd likely be ordered to pay much more and would face even more public humiliation. By July, life had returned to something resembling normal. My business was doing well, actually better than before because several new clients had hired me specifically because of how I'd handled the situation with professionalism and integrity. The story had gotten around in the local business community. Contractor stands up to HOA bully, proves his innocence, gets vindicated. It was good for my reputation. St. Mary's Church had continued to be a great client. Father Michael and I had developed a real friendship through the ordeal. He told me that Patricia had left the congregation, apparently unable to face people who'd witnessed her behavior. The church had actually grown since then, with several families from my neighborhood joining specifically because they'd heard Father Michael had stood up for what was right. Patricia herself had moved out of Meadowbrook Estates in August. The gossip mill said she'd bought a condo in another development, one with a much less active HOA. I didn't follow up on it. She was out of my life, and that was enough. Dennis, as the new HOA president, had transformed the organization. He'd streamlined the rules, eliminating the petty restrictions that had made life miserable. He'd instituted a formal appeals process for HOA decisions. He'd started a monthly neighborhood social gathering to build actual community, rather than just enforcing rules. Property values in Meadowbrook Estates had started rising again as word got out that it was a good place to live. I continued my service contracts with St. Mary's and my other clients, doing the work I'd always done, maintaining heating and cooling systems, keeping buildings comfortable. It was honest work, and I was good at it. Sometimes, on cold winter mornings when I was doing preventive maintenance on a boiler or furnace, I'd think about that Friday in February when Patricia had blocked my oil delivery. Such a small, petty exercise of power, but it had cascaded into months of conflict and stress. All because someone with a little authority decided to abuse it. But it had also revealed something important about community and character. When Patricia had tried to destroy me, the community had rallied around what was right. People like Dennis, Margaret, Father Michael, and dozens of others had stood up against bullying and vindictiveness. The system, slow and frustrating as it was, had ultimately worked. The state board had done its job properly. The legal system had protected the innocent and punished the guilty. The HOA members had voted out a bad leader and replaced her with a good one. In October, I was doing the fall maintenance on St. Mary's boiler system when Father Michael came down to the basement to chat. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking about that Sunday when the heat went out. At the time, it seemed like such a disaster. But looking back, I think it might have been a blessing in disguise." "How so?" I asked, adjusting the fuel mixture on the burner. It exposed Patricia's true character before she could do even more damage, and it brought the congregation together. People talk about that Sunday, about how we all sat there in our coats, determined to have our service despite the cold. There's something bonding about shared adversity. Plus, it got rid of someone who was toxic to the spiritual community. I hate to say it, but the church is better without her. I thought about that. I guess good can come from difficult situations. "Always," Father Michael said. "That's kind of the whole point of faith, isn't it? Redemption, growth, finding meaning in suffering. Patricia tried to hurt you out of spite. She ended up revealing herself and making space for better people to lead. You maintained your integrity and ended up stronger and more successful. The church faced a crisis and came through it more unified. God works in mysterious ways, as they say." I finished my maintenance checklist and started packing up my tools. Well, I'm glad I could play a small part in your mysterious divine plan, I said with a smile. You did more than play a small part, Father Michael said seriously. You showed people that it's possible to stand up to bullies without becoming one yourself. You fought back, but with truth and proper channels, not with spite or revenge. That's a powerful example. As I drove home that evening through the autumn dusk, I thought about revenge and justice, about the difference between the two. I could have sabotaged that church heating system if I'd wanted to. I could have made Patricia's Sunday much worse than an hour of discomfort, but I hadn't. I'd simply rescheduled an appointment and let mechanical reality take its course. When Patricia had escalated, I'd responded not with more escalation but with documentation, legal process, and truth. It had taken longer, it had been more expensive, and it had required patience and trust in the system. But in the end, justice had prevailed in a way that revenge never could have delivered. Back in Meadowbrook Estates, the neighborhood was settling into a comfortable evening. Lights were coming on in windows. People were arriving home from work. I saw Dennis walking his dog and waved. He waved back with a big smile. My house was warm, my business was thriving, my reputation was intact. The church where Patricia used to worship every Sunday had heat, reliable heat, maintained by a contractor who took his responsibilities seriously. And somewhere in another development, Patricia Henderson was living with the consequences of her choices, having learned the hard way that petty power plays can backfire spectacularly when you don't know all the connections in your community. I pulled into my driveway, grateful for the warmth waiting inside, grateful for a neighborhood run by reasonable people, grateful for clients who trusted me, and grateful for a legal system that ultimately protected the truth. The heating oil tank in my basement was full. The furnace hummed contentedly, and I had absolutely no regrets about how I'd handled the situation from start to finish. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well, telling the truth, and letting karma do the rest of the work. Patricia Henderson had tried to make my life cold and miserable. Instead, she'd learned that when you try to cut off someone's heat, you might want to make sure they're not the one keeping your world warm.